Hey everyone. Python is one of my favorite programming languages. But I'm definitely not an expert of Python. So, let's take a look at some easy Python snippets you can use to make yourself look like an expert. First up, let's take a look at getting random data samples from a dataset. Let's use the following list. If we wanted to get a random selection of data from this list, we can use the sample function. We can create the list with this line, using the random sample function with this list with 2 random samples. Few things to note. The set1 in the code is the name of the dataset. The number 2 is the number of random samples from this dataset. The output for us in this example is this. Next up we have loops. These are some of the most fun commands within Python. What are loops? They are almost exactly what they sound like. Loops allow us to loop over specified portions of our code. Why is this important? Well, loops save us a bunch of time and effort. The more you use them, the more powerful you realize they are. In Python, there are a few different loops you can choose from. These are for loops and while loops. Let's take a look at the different. In my opinion, the easiest way to tell which loop to use is to determine if you know the number of iterations ahead or not. Let me explain. Let's say you know you have 10 values, and you need to add 10 to each value given. You can use a for loop since you pretty much know all of the values. However, let's say you didn't know those values. In that case you can use a while loop. Now, let's take a look at an example. The basic structure of a for loop is like this. This is a very basic example, but this loop will essentially continue to run until it runs out of variables. With a while loop, the structure is a little bit different. With while loops, we basically want to loop a set of commands while our code is true. In my opinion, the best way to learn about loops is by building out some projects. Which is exactly how I learned about these statements. Next up. One of my favorite little tricks with Python is checking the size of variables, datasets that are inside of our environment. We can use the getSizeOf function to actually see the amount of bytes our specific attribute has. Let's take a look at the following list. If we wanted to determine the size of this list, we must first import the sys. We can then use the built-in getSizeOf function like this. Quick thing to note. Make sure to change the name of set1 to the name of your variable, list, dataset. At this point, you will see a number come out in our Python environment. This is essentially the amount of bytes that our list has. Next up we have if, else statements. These are very easy concepts to understand. Essentially, the easiest way to realize the benefit of these commands is with this line. If this happens, continue on. If it doesn't happen, do this. For some reason, that statement clears up the value behind these statements. Let's take a look at some examples. The top statement is a basic example. Essentially, if the value of var is less than 3, then Python will print that statement to the console. If it doesn't detect that, the code will move on. However, let's say we wanted the console to do something else if var is greater than 3. Well, this is where we can use the else command. With this example, we can now print another statement to our console. These statements are super important to understand as well. There you have it. Do you know any other Python snippets we should know about? I would love to hear your thoughts about this. If you have any suggestions, thoughts, or just want to connect, feel free to follow me on Twitter. Also, below is a link to some of my favorite resources for learning programming. Thanks so much for reading.